Welcome. I'm Anita Thurmond, and I'm the worship associate here at Horizon UU Church this morning. We're so glad to have you with us, whether you're joining us in person or virtually. Whether you're here for the first time or whether you've been here for longer than you can remember, here at Horizon, we welcome people of all faiths and of no faith in particular. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome among us.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Meredith Barber. I'm the minister here at Horizon. So I just want to start with one really quick announcement. It's listed on your pink insert. So we are going to have a gathering next Sunday when I will be away. Reverend Erin Walter of Texas UU Justice Ministries will be in our pulpit. We're so excited to have her. We're also going to collect our Share the Plate offering for March next Sunday for Texas UGM. And she's going to be holding a gathering here at Horizon at 1 o'clock with tacos to kind of have her meet everybody in Intalk and talk about Texas UU Justice Ministries. So what we really need is, if you plan to come to this, which I think you should, please follow this link and let us know that you're coming so we know what food to get. And yeah, I think it should be really exciting. So thank you all.
Good morning. I'm Carolyn Moore, board president, and I've got an announcement to make, and it's a little long one, but if you bear with me, it's an important one. As most of you know, Reverend Meredith Barber has been our interim minister since August of last year, and she'll be with us for the next year and a half. Now it's time for us, though, to start the process of searching for our next settled minister. And Meredith will be available if or when we need support as we go through this process. Take a breath, breathe. I'm going to run out of breath as I talk. Okay, one of the first steps in that process is for the congregation to elect voting members to serve on the Ministerial Search Committee, otherwise known as the MSC. Some of you will remember that we've done this before, and that selecting a search committee is the responsibility of both Horizon's leadership and the entire congregation. Usually, the selection of a search committee happens between the middle and the end of the first year of interim ministry, which is where we are now. Believe it or not, it's gone quickly for some of us. As we educate and prepare for this search, we'll be doing some reflection to notice where we are at this moment. We need to ask ourselves a lot of questions, including what kind of ministry do we need now, and how are we different from the last time we were in search? So we're kicking off this search today and beginning the process by choosing who will serve on this important 7-member MSC. Keep in mind that the search committee should represent the entire congregation, be trusted by the congregation, be in touch with the changing nature of the congregation, and be responsible for developing a good process for itself, the congregation, and Unitarian Universalism. So, as you think about potential candidates, you might also consider who in our congregation works well with others, who can represent the whole congregation well and not just a segment of the church, who has no personal agenda and can best serve the congregation as a whole, who knows the history and culture of Horizon, whether they are old or new to our church, Who has been and/or is active in the congregation and demonstrated themselves to be responsible leaders and/or responsible participants? One of the most important qualities of a congregation to potential settled ministers is our self-awareness of our strengths and weaknesses. What are we like at our best, at our worst, or on an average day? Who would be able to know and relate that information well to potential ministers? So, after thinking about these questions, ask yourself, who in the congregation do you trust to work on behalf of our church as a whole? The Board and Leadership Development Nominating Committee, otherwise known as the LDNC, will be overseeing this selection process, and the congregation will vote on the final slate of names at our May congregational meeting. So here's the process after all that, and we're doing it a little different this time. We're asking that each voting member of Horizon suggest the names of up to 3 members who you think would be good candidates for the MSC. For you all here in the sanctuary, you'll find a piece of paper was placed on your chair or somewhere around you. If you want to do this today, fill in the names, thinking about the questions that I already mentioned, fold it and stick it in the box at the Welcome Center. If you'd rather think about it and do it from home, there's a form you can complete and submit online. The link is in the newsletter and will be on the website. We're asking that you submit each name only once, and only 3 names. You'll be able to submit your 3 names through April 3rd. Then, from all the suggestions, the board and the LDNC will prepare a spreadsheet and collaboratively and confidentially select and prioritize the potential candidates from this pool and talk with them individually about their interest and ability to commit the time and energy of serving on the MSC. We'll then recommend the 7-person slate for congregational consideration and approval in May. So, now that you've heard the process, you might be thinking, but I haven't been around people for 2 years. And I know that it's been a while since we've all been together as a congregation in person. So think of the people you've seen and met at coffee hour or in other meetings on Zoom. Think of who you've talked to during MetroCrest drive-thrus and picnics. Log into our member portal on the website and go through the membership list alphabetically to jog your memory. There are a couple of things I'm asking you not to do. Please don't ask the people you're considering if they'd like to or want to serve. I know this is hard, but try not to assume that they wouldn't or couldn't serve. If you think they'd be a good candidate, just submit their name and let them decide for themselves when a board or an LDNC member contacts them after the selection process or after the recommendation process. So that's it. There's an all-church email going out next week with more information, and we look forward to seeing who you recommend and who will serve on our MSC to help us select our next settled minister. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for that announcement. I know that's information everybody's been looking forward to, and I'm so happy for you guys that you're beginning this process. I am. It's exciting. So our call to worship this morning comes from the writings of the Reverend Erica Hewitt, and this is a bit of a call and response. Let us call each other to this time and place as we seek the ground of our being. When invited, please respond, I am arriving. Together, we arrive. We are here in body, and yet we are still arriving. When we left our homes this morning, we left behind to-do lists, coffee, household tasks, family members, and even pets. All of these await our return. I am arriving. Together, we arrive. Some of us don't remember the last time we had a quiet moment to ourselves, and yet we have chosen to be here, together, to tend to our souls and to one another. I am arriving. Together we arrive. In the days since we've last met, some of us have been changed, while others are inviting change to take place within them. Some of us have experienced loss. We've lost things, lost opportunities, or even maybe people dear to us. I am arriving. Together we arrive. Some of us are fighting battles we can't even speak about. Others feel happy enough that we could have flown here with our own arms. We arrive, not knowing quite what to expect, but finding comfort in what is familiar. I am arriving. Together we arrive. Our arriving will not happen all at once. As we each settle in, we will find our way into togetherness, and in our own time, arrive. I am arriving. Together we arrive.
For our chalice lighting this morning, we have words by Eric Heller Wagner. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life.
I invite you now to join together in saying the words of our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together. So I invite you to rise, either in body or in spirit, and join in singing our opening hymn. This is Meditation on Breathing. It's number 109 in the Teal hymnal.
So this one is going to require a little audience participation.
Okay.
So can you give me a seat? So if you feel so inclined, you're going to join me in singing Breathe In and Breathe Out. It's going to just be on that same note. It goes like this. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. Good. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love.
Thank you so much, Saj. That was so much fun. We come now to the time in our worship service where we share our gifts to sustain the ministries of this church. We said last week that to give is a gift, and to give is to plant for the future. The offering will now be joyfully given and received. Our first reading this morning is called Religion at Its Best, and it comes from the writings of the Reverend Sarah Gibb Millspaugh. She writes, "Religion is as much about faith in humanity as it is about faith in deity. And many of us will find that over and over, our faith in humanity gets tested. We are immersed in a culture that's deeply corrupted by selfishness, greed, and oppression-born privilege and fear. It's all too easy for us to justify the dehumanization, ostracization, suffering, and death of others. It's all too easy for us to devalue some humans' lives and feel somehow like we're still good, upstanding, moral people. Religion at its best asks us to do better than this, to rise above the selfishness and status seeking, the othering and xenophobia that come so easily to us. Religion at its best, and our Unitarian Universalist faith, calls us to honor that which is sacred in each person, even those we might hate, even those who we find disgusting. It impels us to accept on faith that there is a sacred spark, a worthy spark in every person. This can sound mundane, but it's very radical, revolutionary even. Each person sacred, each person worthy. Accepting this on faith changes how we live. In this time when so many of us live in fear, let us renew our pledge to live out those sacred and humane teachings that draw us toward compassion, love, and justice in ever-widening circles of care." Here ends the reading. We come now to the time in our service that we set aside for meditation and prayer. During this time, we'll share a moment of silence. We'll hear the joys and sorrows of this community. We'll hear a spoken prayer, and we'll join together in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. I invite you to join me now in a moment of silence. This morning, we share in thinking of Anita Thurmond, whose daughter, Susan, received a kidney transplant yesterday. We also join with Menica and Bhaskar in sharing their joy. Happy Holy. May this holy add more love and color to your life and family. May it be so. Loving God, Spirit of life, mystery in which we live and move and have our being, draw near to us this morning and hear our prayers. We give thanks this morning for birdsong, for sunshine, for all the little ways in which we can tune in to the rhythm of life. We give thanks for the reminders, day after day, of why we are here. This morning, we return to faith and wonder together again, who or what am I willing to give my heart to? And how can I do so in this uncertain world? Remind us that faith without certainty is possible, and freeing even. Remind us that the more we open ourselves to something bigger, the more room there is for beauty. We lament this morning, as we always will, the injustices of our time. We worry about war, violence, the rising costs of just being a person in this world, the loneliness that seems to undergird so much of daily living. We know that our purpose here is to provide an alternate way of being in this world. For all these things and those left unspoken in the silence of our hearts, we pray today and every day. Amen. I invite you now to rise either in body or in spirit and join in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life, number 123.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Please be seated.
For our second reading, we hear the words of Albert Hufstigler, "The edge of a doubt." There is always that edge of doubt. Trust it. That's where the new things come from. If you can't live with it, get out. Because when it's gone, you're on automatic, repeating something you've learned. Let your prayer be, save me from that tempting certainty that leads me back from the edge, that dark edge where the first light breaks.
Okay, so if you are a regular here, you know that I often like to begin with a story. And our story this morning is from a time when I had just graduated from high school, and I went to a Lil Wayne concert with a bunch of my friends. I don't think that reference is going to hit with about anybody in here, but if it does, good. So we had such a good time. And we probably did a lot of things we maybe shouldn't at that age. But as it got towards the end of the show, he was kind of hyping up the crowd and yelled from the stage, "How many of y'all believe in God?" And I remember two of my friends shrieking to show that, yes, they did. And looking over, just wishing that I could have that kind of certainty, not just about God, but about anything. And then my friend on the other side looked over at me and was kind of like, no, and shook her head, indicating that no, she didn't. And I was kind of caught in this in-between. And neither of their reactions surprised me. Of course, I already knew this because we had been having these kind of conversations about what we believed in for years. We were the kind of teenage girls who loved to kind of spread out a blanket and look up at the stars and talk about life. But I do remember that longing feeling of wishing I knew for sure what it was I believed, of knowing what to put my faith in. This feeling of being nagged by uncertainty, I would learn years later, is so common for people at this age. Theologian James Fowler wrote about just this in his work, Stages of Faith, that we'll talk about a little later. But let me back up a bit and say that our Soul Matters worship theme this month is renewing faith. At the beginning of the month, we talked about trying to use the language of our own hearts, of being open to the words our friends might use to describe their journeys, words like God, prayer, faith, even if they're not our own. Last week, we talked about stewardship and giving as a way to plant trees for our children and our children's children, that they may bear the fruit of love long after we are gone. This week, I thought we'd revisit the topic of faith, sometimes a thorny one for UUs, not from a lens of openness to religious language, but instead focusing on the way faith can grow and change over a lifetime. I said at the beginning of the month that faith is a difficult concept for some of us, and it bears repeating. Maybe it brings up connections to a past we'd rather not remember, or we think it's somehow not for us. As much as we might eschew binary thinking, faith is something we definitely think of as binary, something we either have or we don't, and if we don't, we might think it's not for us ever. And honestly, that makes me kind of sad because I don't see it that way. Faith, opening and giving my heart to the interconnected web, is not something that I have always had. Instead, it is something I've arrived at by traveling the winding road of doubt. My faith still is not rooted in certainty about any concept of God or the universe, but rather in the knowing that no matter what happens, I will not be traveling the journey of life alone. I also said at the beginning of the month that the word for faith in Pali, the language of the Buddha Sutras, when translated means to set your heart upon, to give your heart to something. And faith, I think, is a journey, one that can always be revived and renewed in little ways. We can always choose to give our heart to something new, again and again, throughout our lifetime. Theologian and professor of human development James Fowler created a model of different stages of faith, which a lot of you may be familiar with. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one of them. And this is one of those times where I invite you to let your mind wander, not to hang on every word, but to think about yourself at these ages and stages. What were you like as a child? What were your questions about the world? What were you like as a young adult? What questions might have driven your family a little crazy? Just let the words wash over you like waves. So faith begins in something called an undifferentiated state, usually in babies and toddlers who might experience faith through a relationship with those who care for them. When parents and other loving adults in their lives meet their needs, babies and toddlers form a foundation of love and trust that you can build on. And this is so intuitive, I think, for so many of us, we may not even realize that it's happening. So as our kids grow up and become preschoolers, faith is something we learn by watching. We watch our parents, other adults around us. We watch people in church singing the hymns and sharing joys and sorrows. And faith at this age isn't a set of ideas, but it's intuitive. It's something that we watch, and our kids become involved in our rituals. This is the age where I first became curious about church, both my grandmother's Methodist church and the small UU gatherings we'd attend with my parents. I'd want to participate in the activities and wonder why we did the things we did. And it's this curiosity that we want to nurture and lift up. And so as our children get older, they tend to exhibit what's called mythic literal faith. Faith becomes stories told and rituals practiced. And kids at this age know the difference between things that are true, that we can verify, and things that we just kind of fantasize about or speculate about. And this is why we say that parents and caregivers are their child's primary source for faith development. They learn by watching us. As kids move into adolescence, ages 13 to 18, people start to think abstractly. We can see layers of meaning in stories. Rituals and stories become one whole narrative about the nature of faith. At that age, we might be able to understand why we participate in things like flower communion, how it helps us see the beauty in every person and visualize our interconnected web of creation. And in this stage, religious authority becomes really important. Then, as we reach young adulthood, 18 to 22, we start to question our assumptions and to question authority most of all. This is the time when someone begins asking deep questions about their faith, and they may leave their tradition of origin if the answers aren't to their liking. People who are spiritually maturing will often hold close parts of their faith tradition and reject others. They begin to take ownership of their own journey. Fowler next writes about what's called conjunctive faith, and this is somewhere people don't usually get until their early 30s. Here, the struggles and questioning of stage 4, the kind of frustration with answers that don't meet our liking, open up into a different, comfortable place where someone is okay with knowing that some answers have been found and others may never be found. At this stage, people tend to be more open and curious about the faith perspectives of others. They know that listening to the experience of others may deepen their own journey. This is when many of us learn to be okay with uncertainty, where we begin to realize that it may have something to teach us. We understand that we can learn a great deal from the stories of others. Finally, Fowler writes about what's called universalizing faith. Most people don't get here. People at this stage become important religious teachers because of their ability to relate to people at all the rest of the stages. People at this stage don't hold on to life too tightly, though they cherish it deeply. They put their faith into action, usually by challenging the status quo. This, I think, is where we'd all like to end up, though it's certainly not a competition. The purpose of this exercise is not to compare the stage you think you might be at with your neighbor, but to reflect on where you've been throughout your life. How has faith and belief changed for you over time? Where have you learned to let the quest for certainty fall away? So part of the reason that I'm kind of pushing you all on this, both the language of the heart and the openness to different concepts of faith, is because I want to leave you all, when my time with you is over, ready to give your hearts to someone new. I want you to be ready for your called minister to build relationships with all of you. I want you to accept them as you have me, to love their stories as you have mine, to welcome their skills and experiences that might be different than anything you've known before. And I want this for you, both because I care deeply and also because I care for the future of our faith and for our colleague that might serve after me. Sometimes we think we have to be sure about something to give our hearts to it. After all, we want to know what we're getting into. But I've noticed that the best things in life, the things most worth having, are the things we give our hearts to without a shred of certainty. When we have a child, we have no idea what the future will be like. I've watched my friends become parents over the past few years, and they all say that nothing can ever prepare you for what's coming. You have no idea what's about to hit you. But they've also said that it's better than they could have imagined, alluding to the idea that no sort of certainty would be able to capture it. In the words from the poem Anita read us earlier, there is always that edge of doubt. Trust it. That's where the new things come from. Now, the idea of being open to doubt and to uncertainty, to questions, isn't strange or particularly difficult for you to use. But sometimes we think we're supposed to do this all on our own, literally as individuals, instead of wondering together in community. And I don't know if that's true. It's also true that many of us say that we're comfortable with uncertainty and change when maybe that's not really the case, or at least not the full picture. Maybe we'd like something a little more certain to give our hearts to, and I've definitely felt that way. And in the case of faith, I think this can almost manifest in not allowing ourselves to claim faith without certainty, in not allowing ourselves to give over our hearts for something we don't fully understand. And in this way, we kind of close ourselves off. Frederick Buechner wrote in his book, Beyond Words, "Whether your faith is that there is a God or that there is not a God, if you don't have any doubts, you're either kidding yourself or asleep. Doubts are the ants in the pants of faith. They keep it awake and moving." That's a good one. I talked last week, for folks who were here, about my experience at Heifer Ranch, about teaching about injustice, and about the uncertainty I felt in my own life at the beginning of that experience. And my faith throughout my life has transformed from that of uncertain teenager to something wider. Throughout my time at the ranch, life took on a sort of monastic rhythm, dictated by the needs of animals I was looking after and people I was teaching. Rising with the sun, I eventually learned to do things like milking goats, building fences, and planting trees. And I gained confidence, too. As I let myself be open to new friends and experiences, the world as I had known it before expanded before my eyes. I got up to watch the sunrise every morning and drink coffee on the porch with friends, and I stepped quickly across cattle guards. I began to realize that a slow walk on the rocky paths and through the woods could be a prayer. In the way the sunset shone through the tallest trees I'd ever seen, I felt the connection I had been longing for. Reverend Paul Razor wrote in his book, Faith Without Certainty, "Theology involves the interplay of three dimensions: the rational intellectual dimension, the emotional spiritual dimension, and the practical lived dimension." In the words of theologian Sally McFague, thinking, doing, and praying belong together, and that has certainly been true for me. That time also opened up a sense of possibility in my life, that it's possible to step off the beaten path. And I wonder for you when something like that may have been true. Sharon Salzberg, the Buddhist teacher that we heard from earlier this month, wrote in her book on faith, like a subliminal message being played under the predominant music, a sense of possibility, no matter how faint, drives a wedge between the suffering we may wake up with each day and the hopelessness that can try to move in with us on a permanent basis. It inspires us to envision a better life for ourselves. It is this glimmer of possibility that is the beginning of faith. So this morning, I'm thinking back to my 18-year-old self dancing that night on that grassy hill, wishing for certainty. The glimmers at that time were already there. I just had to learn to follow them. So where, I wonder, might there be glimmers of possibility for you in this life? Where might there be something you set your heart upon that does not ask for certainty? Where might you find that small voice inside that calls to you from somewhere beyond? May it be so. Amen. I invite you now to rise, either in body or in spirit, and join in singing our closing hymn, Voice Still and Small. And it's number 391 in the gray hymnal.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain singing, calming my fears, quenching my tears, so all the years singing.
Extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not our mission to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. This we do because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world. So friends, my hope for you this morning is that you might release yourselves from the need for certainty. Let it go and be free. Go in peace.